AI. It's interesting. We're probably going to have 5 or 6 agents. You personally will have 5 or 6 agents working, and I'll have my 5 or 6. And long term, my agent will do business with your agent. So you're sleeping and things are getting done.
Hello, and welcome to CEO Authors, the show where leaders share their stories, strategies, and ideas that drive success. I'm your host, Carl Taft, and today I'm excited.
Cliff, welcome, sir.
Carl, it's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
For sure. Well, I mean, listen, you've worn a lot of hats, right? Founder, board advisor, mentor, author, investor, built and exited multiple companies. And instead of just starting the next one, you chose to work with leaders, boards, family offices, and capital. I'd like to start there, actually. Did something change for you at some point?
Well, I think the last company I sold to a Fortune 500 company, and getting integrated from an entrepreneur to a larger enterprise was a lot of learning that took place. And then I went out and worked for an organization, which was reverse logistics when you bring something back to a store that needs to be a disposition for the product. And we had about 250 employees and 2 million square feet. So yeah, you need a golf cart. It's like a campus. And the president and CEO doesn't always want to show up. And, I sort of, with the engineering team, we're running this fine organization. Good people. We opened up Amazon, Walmart. There was a lot of growth that took place, when you start to work with these larger enterprises and understand sort of the velocity of product going through their supply chain. Somebody like an Amazon would send us 11 tractor trailers a week. That's a lot of product that's coming through, facilities, and you can't keep it. Even with 2 million square feet, you got to turn it over. So it's always about the team. So the enlightenment was, how do you provide value to others? How do you help the team thrive, have a good quality of life at work? And also, back at home, the family, that nucleus is really, really important. And, the foundation, which we can all, I'll leave something in our listeners because I care, is the goal setting. If we can get our youth and the parents, meaning our listeners, to write their goals down on paper. And I have a course, people can, Google me, Cliff Locks, to help people be able to be articulate on what their goals are, as we work through life. It's kind of neat that subliminally we're making decisions all day long. And if you write your goals down, you start saying yes to things that help you actually achieve what your goals are and no to things that are going to hold you back. So it's a very easy exercise, about 15, 20 minutes to write your goals down on paper. It can't be always here. It's got to be on paper. It works a lot better. With my children, I did it when they were 14, and it was magical to watch them take ownership of their learning, their lives, and how they turn into young adults and to adults, being parents and stuff. It's neat.
Yeah, you had shared with me previously how many people actually do write their goals down. Do you want to share that for our audience? Because I find that a lot.
Scary. If you ask me, it's only 3% of the world has written their goals down.
Yeah.
Think about 97% of the world has not taken the time to write down on paper what they want to achieve. And it only takes 15, 20 minutes. Now, the course I have will take you got to watch some YouTubes, and it'll bring you up to, and I think really what it is how do we spark the desire to write your goals down, why it's so powerful and impactful. And it becomes self-evident once you get the knowledge. What kind of leaves me speechless is the universities aren't doing it. The high schools aren't doing it. I've only seen one organization do it really, really well. Not corporate, but helping youth. Stephen Covey's organization. So grandpa passed away, dad's passed away. The 2 boys run the company. And they have a program called The Leader in Me. And it's goal setting for the youth, but we're talking kindergarten through 12th grade. It's the only program I've seen to help a young person get their goals down. And then the child takes ownership of their learning because they're running the teacher-parent conference. So the child, they're also getting up in front of the group of, their classmates, and they're articulating, subject matter and their responsibility. They're in pods of 4 desks together, and they'll rotate that responsibility, throughout the school year. So, it's not hard to create thriving individuals with their goals written down and do some really amazing things in their lives, and really parents to be proud of what the children are accomplishing. Because, we're dads, and the ability to understand and our listeners to understand, we have a fiduciary responsibility to help the kids get wins or stack wins on top of each other in their lives. Don't knock out the creativity. They're going to get into trouble a little bit.
Right.
But, they got to stand on their own. They're looking for the kids to be independent. You want them out of your house. You want them to earn a good living. You want them to be a good citizen, be healthy, and thoughtful, and care about their teams that they're going to interact with. Play well in the sandbox, they say.
Well, I've shared with you, I have children, right? So for the listeners out there, right, that say, okay, how do I implement something like this? I mean, I know it's as simple as, hey, here's an exercise, write some goals down, but is there more to it than that you would suggest?
I think the reason I wrote the course, and really it was the foundation became from my mentor. And my mentor is Brian Tracy. So Brian Tracy. And he's in his late 80s at this point. You're really a very, very different individual if it's like a business plan without any kind of complication when you write your goals down. Okay? The brain needs a plan. When you look at somebody that's developing software, there's a program. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Agentic AI, to build those large language models. All of our listeners have a much more valuable brain than those large language models. We all have it. We're just gently trying to persuade all of us, you got to write your goals down, because the brain subliminally wants to help you, but it needs the instructions, the program in essence. And you get to decide, sort of how much detail and color and timelines you'd like to articulate on paper. But I can guarantee you will blow away in a positive way the goals you write down. You will achieve it and more. And that's how powerful that is. Does it work? It always works. I'm in Dubai, I'm in Germany, I'm in Sweden, I'm here in the States, I'm in Australia with clients. It always works. I can't coach people without their goals written down, because what are we measuring? In other words,
right.
KPIs, which stands, KPI, key performing indicators. You need to measure something. You need to be accountable. Everybody, they want to create wealth. Well, wealth is just a way to measure, somewhat one of the attributes of success. So, the two of us also, the other thing, you've done, when you think about soccer and the kids and being involved in their lives. Yep. I was a soccer coach for my kids. Now, I was also their scout leader, Boy Scout leader. What it does is it takes, quality time with your children and puts it on your calendar. You have to be there. You're the coach or you're the leader. And that quality time you spend with your kids is magical. You cannot delegate it to somebody else. So if you want good, high functioning children that turn into wonderful young adults and great adults. All right. Now, I'm going to warn you, the other side for our listeners, my wife and I have conversations. We're married 38 years. So there's a whole other piece of that if you want to get into it on the marriage side. Children need direction. All right. It needs to come from, sometimes people, my kids don't listen to me. Well, did you spend the time when they were young to nurture those relationships? But the secret is the cat's in the cradle. There's a song out there, the cat's in the cradle. The kids are going, at some point, they're going to not need you. And that sort of relationship you had with them before, when they were younger, is going to have a very large impact on what the quality of that relationship is later. They may not still need you, but it could be something that's friendly. And they get on the phone when they, have a question, they look for some guidance, but it won't be frequent. So when they get into their 30s, that whole generation is different than us. They're independent, social media is, much more prominent.
Right.
The attention span is 6 seconds. They're used to flipping.
Right.
So, they're different, Agentic AI agents is probably going to be impactful, not just the work environment, but for the children. They're getting out of college and trying to find a job is getting a little bit more difficult. Okay, so career planning is really, really important back before, maybe the sophomore year. So one of the things I love about the scouting piece was all of it was about career planning. So the merit badge program was electricity. You had things like woodworking, plumbing, and HVAC, but you had entrepreneurship, computers, electronics, nuclear science, medicine. All of these were separate merit badges to help a young person help figure out what do you want to do with your life, your career. So if you can get a child to figure it out when they're in high school before they choose a university and a program they're going to enroll in, because now it's probably $100,000, let's say, depending on your public, you get a much better outcome or more bang for the buck with that pre-planning where the child is enthusiastically has figured out what industry or, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do with your life? Trying to figure it out in college, I think personally is late. Not everybody will agree with me, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much in flux. I mean, as a parent who has a sophomore in college and a freshman in high school, it's challenging to think through that and try to be that advisor to say, hey, think about, X, Y, and Z as you're going through this. But I can see your point. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you talk business over dinner with your children?
I almost want to say no, but I guarantee I do.
So I'm trying to share with you that I'm proud of you and our listeners if they are talking business over dinner.
Yeah.
I think the children need to understand some of the inner workings of what it's like with team work, expenses, revenues, pieces. The scouting program has a personal management merit badge. And you're going to have a conversation with your parents on what it costs to run the house, meaning a mortgage, utilities,
Smart.
insurance, buy a car, what's involved in the insurance. They need to do a pre-plan on a major purchase. They may not pull the trigger. It could be a large TV or a car. You don't have to buy it, but the idea of doing the planning and going on to Consumer Reports and doing the analysis. Think about that strong individual now that understands, hey, I'm going to make a major purchase. I got to do some research.
Yeah.
What's a doodad? It's something, it's nice to have, but you don't really need it. Did you save up the money or did you do an impulse buy? Talk about credit cards. You can get into credit card debt. You can get into trouble. Well, good debt, bad debt. Does the good debt, it's a home. It's got something that'll appreciate.
Right.
You're going to buy into a business.
Right. Generate cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, my kids learned how to drive forklifts when I ran a chemical company, right? Like it was that. So it was always just part of
that's
the family,
okay.
right? I mean, and I.
But you got CapEx and OpEx.
Yeah.
You got expectations and timelines and project management.
Yeah.
These kids need to know about these things.
Yeah.
Bring them to work if you can. If they have family day or something at work.
Well, and since we're talking about the idea of, ROI and generating money, right, as they go to college, right, that's some of like my dynamic or my conversation that I want to have with them, right, when the going rate for a mechanic or a plumber is, what an attorney used to be, not too long ago, right, and what does it take to do that versus, a white collar job and what's the risk of replacement and being strategic. But then at the same time, right, there are transferable skill sets, right? Like I feel that every human being should work in a restaurant.
Okay.
A restaurant, right? To be able to get immediate feedback on emotional intelligence and customer interaction.
Okay.
And take that skill set, beyond the restaurant, if you will, right? I think that's a skill that is transferable to any one of our use. Now, personally, I've never worked in a restaurant, but I've had to have enough interaction with customers and others to kind of figure out how to be influential, persuasive, etc.
The other piece of it is listening.
Yeah. Right.
You're on the other side. You got to take an order. In other words, when you think about it, you're interacting in the back of the house, the front of the house.
Right.
You want to get a tip, you want to get rewarded immediately, let's say for a nice, going out and doing the right thing by the customer base.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard to create wealth. Now, the listeners may not always agree with that. In other words, working 9 to 5 is probably not going to be easy to create wealth. All right. Being an entrepreneur has risk. Life is, there's always risk involved. But once you get out of, you write your goals down, you get out of your comfort zone and you take ownership of what the forward-looking story looks like in your life. My wife brought something up really, really, wonderfully. Her name's Elise. And I met her on Valentine's Day going from Long Island to New York City on the Long Island Railroad. Okay. We sat next to each other and we had some clients that were in common. I'm going to deviate a little bit. Women, are brighter than the men and they have better intuition. Now, our listeners could disagree and I'm okay with that. But I'll give you an example. On our first date, we went to a boat show at the Nassau Coliseum. And, it's with the Islanders or New York Islanders, play. They've had won multiple Stanley Cups. She asked me there, did they have an auto show in that building on our first date? I went out 6 months later and I created an auto show in that building. It was her idea, but I actually executed on her idea. So it's magical when you start to do the listening. Another piece, what we're talking about relationships, business and relationships are kind of interesting. So the home dynamics has a large impact on what your life looks like at work. So when your wife or fiance or your girlfriend ask you to do something, please stop with what you're doing, go do it, and come back to whatever it was you were working on. That immediateness of giving them something forward, and being attentive to their needs is magical. Now, not everybody has to agree. Why not take our wives, fiancés, and girlfriends and put them on a pedestal and look after their needs?
I mean, the same behavior, follows you into the workplace, right? When the boss says, "Can you do X, Y, and Z, or can you stay late?" It's, "Yes, sir. How high, sir? Yes, ma'am. How high?" And that just builds rapport, and you become irreplaceable, hopefully. But that's
moving up,
that's
somebody's
debatable
going
as
to
well.
do your job.
Yeah.
No question. Yeah, you got to build a strong foundation below you.
Yeah.
Look, men, you should open up the car door. You should pull the chair out. If your wife cooks, you should be doing the dishes. If your wife washes clothes, you should help her fold.
Yeah. I would say all the entrepreneurs that I've ever kind of run circles around, or not run circles around, run circles with, big part of their success has just been the support network at the house.
Magical. Right. So a wife of an entrepreneur is not an easy job.
A partner could be a girl, but yeah, you're right.
Not easy. In other words, it's a very special individual that's married to an entrepreneur, because you're on. You're not really shut down the business piece
ever.
But if you want to sell the business, you can't be the hyper focus on what makes that business run, because you're going to take the cash and you're probably going to leave it with a employment contract, maybe over 18 months later. And the business needs to run, and the acquirer is looking for future cash flow, profitable cash flow.
Right.
That's why they bought the company.
Right.
Find a customer base. You have to figure out what's in it. But if you're the sole individual, it's the glue of this fine organization, you're not really that sellable.
Yeah.
So the bench is really, did you take the time to put training and the efforts and the mentorship into train that depth of the bench? Think about baseball. Everybody's got a position, but they can cover a different position. Soccer, football, running backs, whatever it may be. The idea is.
Yeah, I had coffee with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about, he's in a completely different industry, but he runs circles with a lot of business owners, and he basically was saying, I was asking him, how can you tell when it's a good business? He says, for me, the common denominator is when the wife tells him it's time to retire. It's not something pushing them out of the business. It's something that's pulling them out of the business. Yeah.
So I'll give you a takeaway, and for our listeners, because you really do a really, really nice job, and you really care about the folks that are being invited to be part of your tribe, which is very positive. When you look at a business, the business is really about creating the ability to pull wealth out of the company. I know a lot of folks want to invest everything back into the business, and they want to grow it. Where I look at it, I build to sell. So before I start a company, I'm really looking at what does the vision of success look like, working backwards. So the acquisition, I'm thinking, what's the buyer really need to be able to feel confident that the company is going to continue to grow and scale and will pay you millions of dollars for the value. Now, the other side of it is we have team members, listeners that are part of a team. How do you add value to your team and your company? I'll scare our listeners. You ready? You get a salary, you got benefits. I think you should be generating 10x in profit for your employer. 10x more value than you take in salary, taxes, and benefits.
Totally agree.
Okay. When you go in there and you start looking at that attitude, how do I add value to my team, to my company, to my clients, to the customer? It really turns things around. You're looking at things different. I'll go a little further with my clients, I do mentoring, executive coaching.
Yeah.
I think we have a fiduciary to help our clients. So we're too deep. So a customer's customer. So if our client's doing really, really well we're helping their clients, they're not going to unplug our client, which means we stay and we continue to help the organization. Yeah, it's really a strong concept. So it's not just your customers. No, it's your customer's customer that we have to look after.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think trust is a good piece of it. I think inquisitive questions. One of the concepts, I was one of the co-founders of the Hyper Accelerator program.
Yeah.
And we've run 7,200 students through this entrepreneurial program. It's about 3.5 months. at $850 a month, $850 USD. I've spoken to hundreds of entrepreneurs, and I can tell you in 15, 20 minutes if they're going to be successful.
Oh, do tell.
There's characteristics of the founding team. Somebody needs to be a hipster, a hustler, and a hacker. So a hipster, a hustler, and a hacker. So just give some thoughts on the criteria of what makes a vibrant individual fit one of those, positions within the organization. If you take money in from an investor, they're writing the check to the founding team. It's not always about what the underlying company is. They trust you, and over time, you may pivot. And the investor is fine with that. You need to figure out how to create a profitable organization that scales. All right. Because at the end of the day, investors, I've had the privilege of writing 21 checks, usually through an angel group called Angel Fire Ventures, part of the New York Angels. We really care about the entrepreneur, but at the end of the day, I want my principal back and I want an upside. Okay. And, 1 out of 10 of these companies, when you look at 1 to 10, company 1 through 6 is probably going out of business. Okay. And 7, 8, could be breaking even. Number 9 is doing, maybe it's 10x, and number 10 is 30x. So it makes sense. Now, I've done something well because the Angel Fire Venture team, the individuals were very, very articulate about the founders. So that hipster, hustler, and hacker concept is we've all owned our own businesses. We've all had exits. So now we're looking at certain criteria of the founders in that entrepreneurial company looking to raise money. Do they have the wherewithal to actually do what their plan looks like? All right. And you need a business plan. You may not put it in the drawer. You may not keep going back to it, but at least you took the thoughtfulness on the front end and you laid out a scenario that moves towards profitability. Okay. They'll never hit their numbers.
Right.
But they'll learn and articulate over time. Now, I run into trouble. I'm one of the earlier investors for a company called Buffer.
Okay.
In Buffer, you can create one social media post and you can push it out to multiple platforms. We're talking YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. X. He doesn't want to sell. So I have my money in there for many, many years. I haven't lost any money.
Right.
But there's no upside. Now, I'm a user. I believe in the company. I believe in the team and what they're doing. But you see, they never took another raise in, which would take out the earlier investors. They didn't do an IPO. They didn't the company. So the investor really, his money's still locked up in that entity.
Right.
So when you're thinking about the investor, I want to take investors in. Think about it from the investor's point of view. We want our principal back. We want an upside. Okay. We want the team to thrive, do some great things. Okay. So, when somebody, is not saying yes to writing a check, somewhere there's something there. They don't think there's going to be an exit. Could be the individual team members, could be the underlying concept. Maybe they don't know the industry well.
Right.
Usually somebody from the New York Angels or Angel Fire Ventures will sit on the board of directors, which will have that vertical expertise in whatever that business is to, guide and try to help. And if there's problems, bring them up early. Another takeaway for our listeners. If you have a problem and you're reporting to somebody, come up with 3 solutions. Use AI, I don't care, all right? ChatGPT, or Perplexity or Gemini, whatever you're going to use, all right? And Grok, with 3 potential solutions. And then you can bring it to the individual you report to, and together you can banter back and forth on which one's the better outcome. Please don't take the monkey, meaning your problem, put it on the individual you report.
If it doesn't work well, here's a problem. What should I do? Boss money.
Yeah, that's not leadership.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of effort to figure out a couple of contingencies, things to work around. We all have issues that come up. When you're working in a really well organizations, you're not putting fires out all day long. You have processes and procedures in place to run a smooth organization. So before you go to the, changing topic on the agentic AI piece, make sure your processes are really well honed before you automate it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if you got to bring in an outside consultant or individuals to help you streamline what's going on in your organization, just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it's productive, effective, and the right way to do it. So, sometimes the other individuals will come in who may have worked with, 30 companies, 40 companies, and they've been educated on a multitude of industries and flow and dynamics. Learn, listen, remember, you're only buying a fraction of their time, but you got, it could be 30 years worth of expertise, 35 years worth of expertise there. Very little they may not have seen. So what you think is the problem, they've been there and done that.
That's a Tuesday. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Makes sense. We started talking about kids. Then we talked about hipsters, hustlers, and hackers, which
Yeah.
I'm going to use. I like that. And we talked about, the ultimate goal in starting a company is to ultimately exit, right? Because it's by design or by circumstance. I mean, there's death and taxes, but the third one is really a business exit if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot with family businesses and family dynamics, succession?
I think it's a key piece. Even when you look at, a financial advisor,
Yeah.
people may hear the word RIA. So they're a registered investment advisor, RIA. Their ability to help that family, meaning it's not just the parents, because as you suggested very nicely, the kids, are going to inherit whatever's left over in that particular, the net worth of the parents at this point. They're going to have to sort of adjudicate, what's there, there might be a home, a business, etc. That financial planner needs to get close to these children because they're going to, if they don't, private wealth has also figured that out, meaning the private banking. You need to spend quality time with those youth because if you want the assets to stay under management within your organization, it's the kids that are going to make a decision at some point in time. So if you involve them, like you and I, you were nice enough, we talk business over dinner. Kids start and bring them to work. Okay. Like they're starting to get up to speed. They're starting to be part of the conversation. Well, what are we investing in? Philanthropy, vacation planning, taking ownership of their education. They got to, again, I had mentioned earlier, better figure out your career before you go to college because mommy and daddy do not want to pay $100,000 and you're just trying to figure it out. No, this is an opportunity to learn project management, put your mouth, open up your ears, be a sponge and get the knowledge in, the vocabulary for whatever that industry is, build confidence in teams, building off of that cool concept.
Yeah.
I'm working with a company that makes, people may know, Mr. Coffee, Food Saver, Revell and Oster and Sunbeam. Okay. Large organization. They were sold to Rubbermaid maybe 2.5 years ago. When you really want to know what's going on in an organization, I want to speak to, say, and it was, an enterprise company there. I wanted to talk to the VP of the call center. So the call center is getting the calls in from the buyers because realize that's a manufacturer that's selling to retail and e-commerce. Okay.
Right.
And is also getting the consumer phone calls with problems on products or usability or, or expectations are being met. Maybe there's a warranty issue. So that individual is getting it from the buyers who buy and from the consumers who bought and have a problem. That individual knows what's going on in that fine organization. So in this case, Vicky was that individual, was the call center. When I sit down with her, question is, are the other departments playing well in the sandbox? So as our listeners go back, you can have a conversation. Whoever's fielding those phone calls knows exactly what's going on. You're putting out fires, you got a process, you got a ticketing system to be able to fix what need, things getting done on a timely basis. Yesterday I was over at a PGA demo day. So I'm down in Florida and it happened over at the Orlando Convention Center. I'm sitting down with a young man who's responsible for the social media posts, which means TikTok, Facebook, they're buying ads. And it's an automated piece of equipment that would sit behind us. Remember, we're talking golf. And it would videotape you, and it's figuring out the ball speed, the club speed, the angle, and the technology would feed back to your phone or a tablet. Okay. And I'm getting into the linguistics, or I guess the nuances of what's going on in the fine organization. I asked him, do you have a lot of product returns? He says, yeah, we got a lot back. Amazon shut us down we had two SKUs. One's more prominent and the other one's more of a smaller unit that you got to put the phone on to do the recording, where the other one is integrated cameras. In other words, the returns were so high that Amazon wouldn't let them they wouldn't let them market it during holiday season because they did not want these back. Now, when you go to Amazon, it tells you if the product usually stays sold or has a high level of returns. So Amazon's using big data to try to help the consumer make a good educated decision. Do most people hold on to the product or there's a return? So Amazon is saying, hey, you, whoever's doing the manufacturing, you got a fiduciary responsibility for the marketing has got to be right. Whatever you're putting on your box, Is there a quick start sitting in the box to get people up and running? In this case, they didn't have a quick start. There's no video sitting out there to get the integration between the device, Bluetooth, onto a smartphone.
Right.
So it's so easy to fix, but it's costing tens of millions of dollars to this fine firm that the out-of-box experience is a problem. It's creating a multi-million-dollar problem. Now the call center, he says to me, look, we get back to everybody, but we take 3 days to get back. We only got 2 people in the call center. I'm like, he knows it's not right, but he's not the CEO.
Right. Not his call. Yeah.
So, when you're looking at it, what's going on in your, our listeners find organizations. Are we looking to straighten this out? You may not feel you have the authority to do it, but I says, look, I'll make you a multimillionaire, to this young man. Why don't we fix that problem? So you go in there and say, look, if I cut the returns by 15%, can I keep 15 or 20% of the
15%? Yeah.
It's the same money, but when we fix it, you get the savings going forward because we fix something that's really
right.
Organization. And I love their product. What's my self-esteem? Hey, send me a product demo.
You get to work on your golf swing, your short game, whatever.
They're good people. They have good quality products. Like, I look at Garmin, one of their products, somebody else worked with another team, and these guys were data guys. And the product doesn't really, the watch works really well, but they have another unit similar to this other one, which is recording. Okay. Garmin's a great company. And records, the striking of the ball going out and giving you some data sets back.
Got it.
So I go back to these guys, both companies, and I says, look, and our listeners may not be familiar with a company called Heygen, Heygen, Heygen. Heygen. I could take 3 minutes of video. I'll create an avatar. It'll be you. It'll look like you, sound like you, and have similar mannerisms. I says, why don't we just take the data set? Because you remember these companies are acquiring data on the clubs and the individual that's striking the ball to go out, and actually give them the corrective action, but do it through Heygen on an avatar. It could be an avatar of them hitting it correctly. Here's what you look like. Here's what you need to do. Slow it down, make it automated. I'm like, you're leaving all kinds of money on the table. Plus, golf can be frustrating if you're not really good at it. And people would be loyal to the brand if you saw the continuous improvement in your skills to go out and play golf.
That's wild.
That's what I do for a living for companies and individuals.
I'm just listening to you talk about, these couple of examples, and I liken it to the management by walking around idea, right? Of just like knowing what's going on in the business, right? Like, and you have to be active and present as an owner to do that, or as leadership to do that. What would you say? So a couple last question. I want to just touch base with you about, what mistakes are founders, owners like making when it comes to trying to transfer leadership to the next generation, right? Is it stewardship or entitlement from, generation number 2? And what would you say to the family businesses out there or owners of family businesses to say like, no, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to write my goals down or whatever it is to transition that.
I'll show you something, just for our listeners too. I've written 7 books. So I really care about the kids. So guiding the next generation to thrive and build the continued success for your family legacy.
Yeah.
Legacy is what's coming afterwards. Here's another one. Key strategies to encourage your children, to succeed and learn and to flourish. You see the word independent? You want them to be independent.
Right. That's the goal. Yeah.
There's a lot of kids that are living home with their parents and they're in their 30s, and I'm like, something didn't go well. That was not really probably mom and dad's plan.
Yeah.
So, when I'll give you another statistic for our listeners. A very high net worth family is worth $10 million without including their primary home. An ultra high net worth is 30 million. So 10 million for very high and 30 million for ultra high. I'm not saying our listeners have that kind of resources, but here's the crazy piece. 70% of the wealth is gone by the second generation. You're talking 10 million or 30 million or more, okay? And by the third generation, 90% is gone. So even the wealthy are having the challenge, those that are working 9 to 5, trying to figure it out. And here's the secret. We need to turn the children into entrepreneurs. They got to be able to use those resources, put people to work, build things, acquire things, really be part of the fabric of what makes the world a better place where we really care about the team. We want to build and sell something profitably. We want to continue to create some wealth for our team members, ourselves, our families. You and I brought up the idea of, take your child to work. They need to follow you and shadow you and see how you deal with it. Our listeners may not know, but I own 5 international new car shows. So brand new cars, my clients would be General Motors and, Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, Mercedes-Benz, et cetera, Jaguar, Lamborghini, whatever. And when you really look at the vibrantness, I brought my dad in to help me run part of the business. In other words, because you're in and out of these buildings in, between 5 and 10 days. So it's a very short blitz of work. Okay. He was blown away on the calmness of being able to treat people with respect, from the truck driver to the individual that's running around with a forklift, to a carpenter, to a teamster, or a client, or a professional actually running around the country setting up these displays, which would be from a decorating house. Calm, appreciative. It's not an old concept of really caring about other individuals and the listening piece. And what happens over time is the unions, they want to come back and they want to work for the show. They can work elsewhere. But they had a really nice time. They were respected. They were cared for. I'll go into some markets where the economics are a little poor. I'll buy them lunch and dinner and stuff. The idea, it's a camaraderie. It's family when you work with me. In other words, I'll give you another instance. I used to give 50% of the profits to the employees. They stayed, they played, they built great companies. They got overpaid. I built to sell. There's going to be an exit. They get an employment contract. I get what? I get an 18-month continuity contract, and I'm out. But I know they're looked after, the team members. So again, I'm not saying everybody's got to give away 50% of the profit or anything. You decide what's good for your fine organization. But, how do you build great companies? It's about the team. And then the Agentic AI, it's interesting. We're probably going to have 5 or 6 agents. You personally will have 5 or 6 agents working with you. And I'll have my 5 or 6. And long term, my agent will do business with your agent. So you're sleeping and things are getting done. Yeah, it's good.
Amazing.
So when you look at the future, it's going to look different. And Elon is trying to articulate, you don't have to love the guy. It depends on your, left, right, or center. But he's trying to talk straight. He's enlightening you, and he's a pretty bright guy. He's running 5 companies, he's got a lot of kids, got quite a few young women in his life, but you don't have to agree with everything. But you and I are not setting rockets up to the,
right.
Basic. Right. We're not boring holes in the ground in Las Vegas where you can run cars through. Okay. We have a solar company, a car company. These are all from scratch. He didn't acquire these. You're looking at the wealthiest man in the world. It's not an accident, but he's capable of raising money. Grok, he's looking at AI. Just, when you're looking at, surround yourself with the winners.
Yeah.
If you got toxic people in your life, you need to get them out of your life or figure out a way. And I mentioned something earlier that my wife had shared, but I didn't bring it up well. Whatever happened to you in your life, our listeners' lives, that's history. Those pages, those chapters in your book have already been written. Don't let it hold you back. You get a fresh page, fresh chapter to write every single day going forward. Take the leadership position, own it, own your life, own what's going on, get your goals down on paper. No excuses. All right. Yeah, life is hard. I respect that. Get some downtime, go take a walk on the beach, nature, the parks, whatever it may be. Clear your head, do some deep thinking and own it. In other words, I tell these kids, I'm not involved right now, but I was on the board of directors for Boy Scouts for 15 years. I had about 14,000 youths. I was responsible for the STEM program. We partnered with the National Lab. Brookhaven National Labs would be one of the national labs in Long Island. There's some really, really bright young people. They're interacting with scientists and engineers. There's big science, $300 million projects that are, they're visiting, they're interacting, they're learning. In this case, it was an engineering merit badge. Each child is such a valuable gift that we can really expend. You can get angry at them. That's not going to help their future. No, you want to nurture them to figure out where their passion is so you can help them figure out their career planning and then how you treat your wife, your girlfriend, and, your fiance has a large impact on what these kids see. They're going to take that learning with them in their future.
Yep.
So stop the nonsense. Take ownership. One of the things I tell the kids, there is go in the bathroom, point the finger in the mirror. That's who's responsible for you. It's you. It's not your mommy. It's not your daddy. Take responsibility of what you're doing. And one of the last things, I told my kids, look, I ain't down you to jail. You get yourself jammed up, you're on your own. So they stayed out of trouble.
Yeah. Sit in it. Consequences for action. Just sit in it.
Very well.
Yeah. Yeah. Cliff, this has been fantastic.
You're very calm.
For our listeners out there that want to connect with you, buy a book, hook up with your coaching, how do they find you?
Yeah, Carl, I'm pretty easy. I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Cliff, Cliff, Locks, Locks. You can Google me. A lot of stuff comes up. I'm very, very prominent on social media. I'll post every single day. One of my posts, it's interesting, on LinkedIn, I had 159,000 views. And 2 days later, I had over 300,000 views. The emotional value of asking somebody to be reflective on their own life and then share it with a community through, in this case, it'd be a short video, giving somebody the opportunity to reassess their own lives resonates very, very well with LinkedIn. I mean, I've had 350,000 views, and most of my views are small. They're 40 to 100 people who will read my materials. So just so you know, these are exceptional. But I have figured out what that algorithm is about. In LinkedIn, it's about helping people empower themselves to take ownership of their quality of life and what's going on. You can't delegate that to somebody else. It's like working out. You can't delegate it. You got to go out there and exercise. You got to eat right. You got to sleep right. Healthcare is broken. Wellness is the new healthcare because we got $5 trillion a year going into it in the US. It's a broken system. Think about an MD or a hospital. They only get paid when you're sick. Pharma doesn't cure anything, pharmaceuticals. They're looking for you to stay on a maintenance drug for life. We got some incentives here that are a major challenge at this point, and there's some folks out there that are trying to fix it, have these conversations at this point.
Right. I won't get into some of the businesses I looked at in the business of healthcare, and it's profitable to have people stay sick.
Yeah, but when you look at it, there are people out there that really care.
Yeah,
100 is the new 30. He's an MD, but he's talking straight. I have another individual here. I'm on the board of directors, and I enjoy being on the board of directors of companies. I'm available. Youthful longevity. Again, it's wellness.
Yeah.
It's not an accident. So what you do with your body in your 30s, your 40s, has a large impact on your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you're abusing your body, you're smoking, you're drinking, you're not exercising, you're not eating right, it's going to catch up.
Yeah.
I'm an EMT, and I'm like an emergency medical technician and a firefighter and a hazmat tech. We spoke about that. And it was volunteers, position, but the knowledge was, when somebody's not right. Yes, I've done CPR on people in an ambulance in the back teching. Yes, I had PTSD, and yes, I needed to talk about it. Doing CPR on somebody, it's real. You get somebody's life in your hands.
Cliff, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Pleasure. Thanks.